I sit on the burgundy velvet armchair in my parents' living room, feeling strangely like a visitor despite having grown up in this house. The silver picture frame on the mantel catches my eye. Grandpa Wallace with his arm around me at my college graduation, his weathered face beaming with genuine pride while my parents stand stiffly beside us. "More tea, Vesper?" Mom asks, her voice unnaturally bright as she hovers near the antique serving cart. "No thank you." I smooth the front of my cream wool dress. A deliberate choice this morning, understated. Professional. A quiet declaration that I'm no longer the little girl they could direct. Dad clears his throat from his position by the fireplace, one hand resting on the ornate mantel as if claiming territory. He exchanges a look with Mom, quick but loaded with unspoken communication. I've seen that look before, usually right before bad news. Across from me, Caleb fidgets with his watch strap, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against his knee. His eyes dart repeatedly to the thick blue folder centered on the mahogany coffee table between us. A single bead of sweat trickles down his temple despite the mild October chill. "Shall we get started?" Dad says, not really asking. He settles into his leather chair with the authority of a judge taking the bench. "We've called this family meeting for an important discussion about Grandpa's estate." The word estate hangs in the air. 3 months since Grandpa Wallace passed, and this is the first time they've wanted to talk about it. Mom perches on the sofa edge, hands clasped in her lap. "Family has always been everything to us, Vesper." She begins, her voice taking on that rehearsed quality I recognize from her charity function speeches. In times like these, unity and shared responsibility become paramount. I notice the new diamond tennis bracelet glinting on her wrist. Curious timing for such an acquisition during what they've described as financial strain. "The thing is," Caleb interjects, voice cracking, "I'm in trouble. Serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I ask, keeping my voice level. He runs his hands through his hair. "I owe some people money. Gambling debts. $390,000. The number lands like a brick, not a round number, specific, calculated, real. "These aren't casino people," he continues, eyes downcast. "They're not exactly patient about repayment." Dad slides the blue folder toward me. "We've created a solution. A new family-managed trust. It would consolidate Grandpa's assets temporarily, just until we get Caleb clear of this situation." My hand doesn't move toward the folder. Instead, I'm suddenly transported back to Grandpa's study, 11 years old, learning chess on the inlaid wooden board that had belonged to his father. "Always think 3 moves ahead, Vesper," he'd said, his blue eyes twinkling as I contemplated my knight. In chess, as in life, the obvious move isn't always the wisest. I study their faces now, Dad's forced confidence, Mom's practiced concern, Caleb's desperate hope. I see the trap they're laying, recognize the manipulation as clearly as if they'd drawn me a map. "I'll need time to review these documents," I say, my calm voice belying the alarm bells clanging inside me. Dad frowns. "There isn't much time, Vesper. These people aren't exactly giving Caleb a comfortable deadline. We've already spoken with the family attorney." Mom adds, rising suddenly, "I made your favorite teach-em-a-meal with honey." She returns with a delicate porcelain cup I've never particularly cared for. Caleb leans forward. "They threatened me, Vez. Said they know where I live, where I go. One of them mentioned how nice our parents' neighborhood is." His voice breaks. "I don't know what they might do." I take the folder but don't open it. "Exactly how would this new trust work?" "Simple restructuring," Dad replies too quickly. "Just temporary control under the family name instead of being divided. For protection." 30 minutes, I say, standing up. "I need to make a quick call first." "Who could you possibly need to call right now?" Mom asks, her pleasant mask slipping. "My financial advisor." I lie smoothly. "I want his perspective on the tax implications." Dad's jaw tightens. "This is a family matter, Vesper." "Exactly. And I want to make sure I'm making the right decision for our family." I walk with measured steps toward Grandpa's study, feeling their eyes on my back. Once inside, I close the heavy oak door and lean against it, allowing myself one deep, steadying breath. The study remains exactly as he left it, leather-bound books lining the walls, the faint scent of pipe tobacco still lingering after all these months. I move to his desk, my fingers tracing the worn edge where he sat for countless hours. I pull out my phone and type a quick text to Gloria. "They're making their move." The response comes almost immediately. "Trust is secure. Proceed as planned." A wave of cool relief washes over me. I tuck my slim portfolio under my arm, the one containing every document Gloria and I prepared over the last 3 months. I touch Grandpa's chest set briefly, grateful for the foresight he taught me. I straighten my shoulders and return to the living room, where my family waits with thinly veiled impatience, completely unaware that I've been anticipating this ambush since the day of the funeral. And I'm already 3 moves ahead. 3 months ago, I stood in the back garden of my childhood home, watching mourners drift across the manicured lawn. The black dress I'd chosen felt too tight around my throat, though the seamstress had assured me the neckline was perfect. Through the study window, I caught a flash of movement. Caleb, hunched over Grandpa's antique desk, sliding something into his jacket pocket. Not grief-stricken. Purposeful. I slipped away from a cluster of distant relatives, their platitudes about better places and long lives well lived, evaporating behind me. Inside the cool darkness of the house, voices carried from the kitchen. Accessing those Vermont properties should be straightforward, Dad said. Wallace always kept immaculate records. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. Douglas, not today. People might hear. 3 weeks, Miriam. We need to move within 3 weeks while everyone still expects us to be sorting his affairs. The lakeside cabin alone could clear most of our debt. I froze, my hand on the banister. Not the grief of loss, but the calculation of gain. The quiet click of numbers being tallied while Grandpa's body was barely cold. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from work offering condolences. I stared at the screen, remembering Grandpa's last words to me, his hand gripping mine with surprising strength as monitors beeped around us. Protect what matters, Vesper. Not everyone understands value. At the time, I thought he meant his collection of vintage mechanical instruments, his passion since retiring from watchmaking. Now, clarity washed over me like ice water. He knew. He had always known. 2 days later, I sat across from Gloria Martinez at a corner table in Cabot and Sons Coffee House, far from my parents' social circle. Gloria's charcoal suit and direct gaze spoke of competence without the pretension that characterized my parents' legal team. So, you suspect your family will attempt to liquidate your grandfather's estate quickly? She tapped her pen against her leather portfolio. No flashy accessories, just a simple gold band on her right hand. I don't suspect. I know. I slid my phone across the table, the recording of my parents' kitchen conversation playing softly between us. Gloria's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained composed. She stopped the recording. I've seen this before, she said, her voice matter-of-fact rather than sympathetic. Adult children who view inheritance as entitlement rather than stewardship. Let's act now. Within a week, we created the irrevocable Wallace Greystone Legacy Trust. I signed document after document in Gloria's downtown office, the scratch of my pen on thick paper oddly satisfying. The Vermont farmhouse where Grandpa taught me to garden went into the trust first. Then the lakeside cabin where he'd written his memoirs each summer. Investment portfolios. His mechanical instruments collection, with each piece photographed and cataloged. The pocket watch, I reminded Gloria. The 1908 Waltham. It needs specific protection. The watch had been Grandpa's most treasured possession, passed down through 4 generations. Its gold case bore tiny scratches from decades of winding, the inside inscription reading simply, "Time reveals truth." But when I visited the safe deposit box where Grandpa kept his most valuable pieces, the watch wasn't there. The velvet-lined box lay empty, its contours holding nothing but absence. I found his repair journal that evening, tucked in a drawer of his desk that Caleb had overlooked. Grandpa had documented every watch he'd ever serviced, including his own, serial numbers, distinguishing marks, precise measurements. Boston has 27 pawn shops. I visited 23 before finding it. The shop in Dorchester smelled of dust and desperation. The man behind the reinforced glass barely looked up when I entered. "I'm looking for a pocket watch," I said. "A Waltham circa 1908. His eyes narrowed. "Got lots of watches." I slid Grandpa's journal entry across the counter. "This one." A flicker of recognition. He disappeared into the back room, returning with a small box. The moment he opened it, relief flooded through me. The familiar gold case. The tiny dent near the winding stem where Grandpa had accidentally dropped it when I was 10. "How much?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. 1750. His gaze was calculating. Guy who brought it in said it was a family piece. Tall fella, nervous hands. Designer clothes but empty wallet, if you know what I mean. Caleb. The description fit perfectly. I counted out the cash. Every dollar a physical manifestation of my brother's betrayal. Not just of me, but of Grandpa. Of legacy itself. The watch felt heavy in my palm, its gentle ticking a counterpoint to my racing heart. I'd paid $1,750 to recover what was already mine, what should never have left Grandpa's possession. That night, I held the watch against my chest, its steady rhythm a reminder of the man who had taught me that time reveals all truths, if you're patient enough to wait for them. And that sometimes, you can't afford to wait at all. At the present, the bronze bell above the cafe door announces my arrival with a gentle ring. Neil Chambers sits alone at the corner table, fingers fidgeting with a napkin that's been folded into geometric patterns. He rises halfway from his chair when he spots me, then sinks back down like a deflating balloon. Vesper, he says, his voice barely carrying over the soft jazz playing through the speakers. You look so much like Eleanor now. I slide into the chair across from him. Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Chambers. Neil, please. I stopped being Mr. Chambers the day I retired. He pushes his untouched coffee mug in small circles. 3 years working for someone doesn't compare to 35 with your grandfather. The waitress appears, and I order black coffee. When she leaves, I place a slim manila folder on the table. I've been reviewing Grandpa's financial records. I say, keeping my voice neutral, despite the questions burning inside me. There are some inconsistencies I'm hoping you might clarify. Neil's hands stop their restless movement. I figured this conversation would come eventually. Did you? Wallace and I spoke often. His eyes find a point somewhere over my shoulder. He worried about what would happen to his collection after he was gone. My coffee arrives. I wrap my hands around the warm mug, but don't drink. The mechanical collection meant everything to him. I know. The words hang between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. 3 pieces disappeared from the collection about 3 years ago. The Breguet carriage clock, the Swiss musical box, and the German astronomical clock. I tap the folder. Grandpa's insurance inventory lists them as damaged by water in storage. Neil's shoulders curve forward. A moment passes, then another. There was no water damage, was there? I press. No. The word falls from his lips like a stone. Your parents sold them. Though I'd suspected it, the confirmation strikes like a physical blow. I set my coffee down before my shaking hands can betray me. Wallace was devastated about those pieces, Neil continues, his voice growing firmer. He loved showing them to visitors. When your parents told him about the supposed water damage, he mourned those pieces for weeks. Called me late at night talking about how he should have kept them at the farmhouse. $75,000. Neil finally meets my eyes. That's what they got for all 3 pieces. Caleb had gambling debts even back then. Smaller, but still significant. I remember that summer vividly. Grandpa had seemed unusually withdrawn during my visits. He'd walk to the display cabinet in his study, open it, then close it again with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his 84 years. Did he ever suspect? I ask. I think part of him did, but Wallace couldn't bear to believe his own daughter would. Neil trails off, his weathered face pained. Your mother was the one who orchestrated it. Douglas went along as he always does. And you never told him? I was his accountant, not his confidant. Neil's voice hardens with self-reproach. I told myself it wasn't my place. Maybe I was just a coward. I think of Grandpa, grieving pieces that weren't destroyed but sold behind his back. My hands curl into fists beneath the table. I should have said something, Neil admits. By the time I worked up the courage, his health was declining, and I convinced myself it would only cause him more pain. So why tell me now? Neil pulls a folded sheet from his jacket pocket and slides it across the table. Because Wallace asked me to watch out for you. 3 months before he passed, he made me promise that if anyone ever tried to access his estate in ways that seemed unusual, I would help you understand what you were dealing with. I unfold the paper. It's a handwritten letter in Grandpa's distinctive script, authorizing Neil to share any financial information with me if necessary. At the bottom, a personal note. Vesper has always seen clearly. She'll need the truth. Thank you, I say, tucking the letter into my folder. There's more, Neil says. Smaller items that disappeared over the years. I've documented everything I could verify. He produces a thin flash drive. Bank transfers, appraisal certificates, dates, it's all there. For the next hour, Neil outlines the systematic plundering of my grandfather's collection. Each revelation stokes the quiet fury building inside me. Not grief, not shock, but a cold, clarifying anger that sharpens my thoughts to a fine point. Back in my car, I call Gloria. They've been selling pieces of his collection for years, I tell her, using the money to bail out Caleb. Does this change our approach? She asks. No, it confirms it. I start the engine. I need you to help me document everything. Irrefutable evidence of their actions, organized chronologically. I'll clear my schedule. For the next 2 weeks, I become a financial archaeologist, excavating the truth layer by layer. Gloria and I assemble a comprehensive record of the betrayal. Each stolen item, each forged signature, each manipulated conversation, all meticulously cataloged in a slim leather portfolio. The day of reckoning arrives faster than expected. When I return to my parents' living room after my strategic retreat to Grandpa's study, I find them exactly as I left them, Douglas standing imperiously by the fireplace, Miriam perched on the edge of the sofa, Caleb slouched in defeat. Have you made your decision? My father asks, impatience crackling through his practiced composure. I place my leather portfolio on the coffee table beside their blue folder. Before I consider your proposal, I say, my voice steady as a heartbeat, I have something to share. With deliberate movements, I open my portfolio and begin laying out documents one by one. Trust certificates, asset transfers, legal declarations, all executed weeks ago. What is this? Miriam asks, leaning forward to examine the papers. The Wallace Greystone Legacy Trust, I reply. Established the week after the funeral, irrevocable and secure. Caleb frowns. I don't understand. It means, I say, placing the final document on the table, that the assets are already protected. From you. The color drains from my father's face as comprehension dawns. For the first time in my life, I've moved 3 steps ahead of him, just as Grandpa taught me. The words hang in the air for 3 heartbeats before Dad explodes. This is outrageous! He hurls the documents across the coffee table. You had no right. We'll contest this immediately. You've stolen what rightfully belongs to this family. His face reddens to a dangerous shade as he stands, looming over the table. Mom dissolves into tears, her shoulders shaking as she buries her face in her hands. How could you do this to us? She sobs. Your own family. Caleb sits frozen, mouth slightly open, looking like a child who's just been told Santa isn't real. But what about my situation? These people will hurt me, Vesper. They'll hurt all of us. I remain seated, hands folded in my lap. The storm rages around me, but I've anchored myself to something stronger than their fury. Truth. Your gambling debts are not my responsibility, Caleb. My voice stays level despite the chaos. Nor are they Grandpa's. You ungrateful little, Dad starts, but I cut him off. Please sit down, Dad. Something in my tone makes him hesitate. He sinks back into his chair, still glaring. I reach into my portfolio again and remove a small envelope. From it, I produce a pawn ticket and place it gently on the table. This is from Harmon's pawn shop in Dorchester. I found it 3 weeks after Grandpa's funeral. I look directly at Caleb. They had Grandpa's 1908 pocket watch. The shopkeeper described you perfectly. Caleb's face crumples. I was going to buy it back, I swear. With what money? The same money you're now claiming to need for these mysterious gambling debts? I shake my head. I paid $1,750 to recover it. A family heirloom that's been in our family for 4 generations. Mom's crying stops abruptly. Caleb, you didn't. But his guilty face tells her everything. I continue, removing another document. I also spoke with Neil Chambers last month. Dad's head snaps up at the name of their former accountant. Neil had quite a story to tell about the mechanical collection that was supposedly damaged in storage 3 years ago. I glance around the room, taking in their stricken expressions. Grandpa mourned those pieces for months. But they weren't damaged, were they? They were sold. For $75,000. That's a lie, Dad sputters, but his eyes betray him. Neil kept records of everything. The sale, the wire transfer to an offshore account, and the subsequent cash withdrawals that coincidentally matched Caleb's previous gambling debt. "You've been spying on us," Mom accuses, her voice brittle with indignation. "I've been uncovering the truth." I lean forward. "I know everything. Every lie, every theft." Dad straightens, attempting to regain control. "We'll contest this trust. You can't just—" "Please do." I gather my documents with deliberate slowness. Discovery will be fascinating. Financial fraud, elder exploitation, tax evasion. The court records would be public, of course. The threat lands exactly as intended. Dad's mouth opens, then closes. Mom's hand flies to her throat. "You wouldn't," she whispers. "I'm not the one who stole from a dying man," I answer softly. "I'm not the one who planned to use his life's work to bail out a gambling addict. Again." Caleb flinches as if struck. I stand, tucking my portfolio under my arm. The room feels smaller now, compressed by decades of lies finally exposed to light. "Grandpa deserved better," I say, looking at each of them in turn. "He trusted you." I walk to the door, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. No one speaks. No one moves. They remain frozen in the wreckage of their collapsed scheme. As I close the door behind me, I feel the weight of inheritance, not of money or property, but of truth and principle. It's heavier than I expected, but I stand straighter beneath it. Grandpa would be proud. 3 days later, the cream-colored business card sits on Mom's kitchen table, its embossed lettering catching the morning light. Alan Prescott, family law, and estate litigation. Mom traces her finger along the edge, avoiding my gaze through the bay window where I watch, unnoticed from the garden path. I hadn't planned to visit today. The certified letter I'd prepared sits in my briefcase, ready for tomorrow's mail. But something pulled me here, intuition, perhaps. Or simply the quiet voice of Grandpa Wallace reminding me to verify before trusting. Mom disappears into the study with the cordless phone. I slip away before she returns, the garden gate closing without a sound. Later, they've contacted Prescott. I tell Gloria over coffee that afternoon. The Boston Legal Center buzzes with activity around us, but Gloria's corner office provides a sanctuary of calm, the downtown traffic, a distant hum beyond double-paned windows. Gloria nods, tapping her pen against her yellow legal pad. Not surprising. What matters is what Prescott tells them. Will he see through the trust? Impossible. Gloria slides a document across her mahogany desk. The Wallace Greystone Legacy Trust is airtight, irrevocable. Even the best attorneys in Boston wouldn't attempt litigation. I scan the document, a summary of potential legal challenges. Each paragraph ends with the same conclusion: futile. The real danger, Gloria continues, leaning forward, her voice dropping, is if Prescott realizes what they did before the trust was established: the pocket watch, the mechanical collection, the documented pattern of theft. I finish. The word hangs between us, heavy with implications. Criminal exposure, Gloria clarifies, her tone gentle but unflinching. Your brother pawned a family heirloom. Your parents sold assets that weren't theirs to sell. Prescott will advise them to walk away before these facts emerge in discovery. My phone vibrates for the 3rd time this hour. Caleb, again. I silence it without looking. They won't stop, I say. They will when they understand there's no alternative. The next morning, my doorman hands me a thick envelope. Dad's handwriting, the expensive stationery he reserves for important correspondence. Inside, photocopies of trust documents, outdated ones from Grandpa's original estate plan, not the new trust we established. His note scribbled in the margin: "We need access to correct this administrative error." I shredded in my office. By noon, Caleb has called 7 times and left 3 voicemails. I listened to the last one during lunch. "Vez, please." His voice cracks, the familiar pattern of manipulation. "These guys came to my apartment last night. Just stood in the hallway watching. They know about Mom and Dad now. They mentioned the Vermont property. Please, I'm scared." I forward the recording to Gloria, adding it to our documentation file. Mom tries next, her approach more subtle. The email arrives at 3:17 p.m. "Darling, I understand you're upset with us. Families sometimes make mistakes out of love. Your father is having chest pains from the stress. The doctor mentioned possible cardiac involvement. Could we please meet, just you and me? No documents, no decisions, just mother and daughter." My finger hovers over the reply button before I close the email. The manipulation feels almost elegant, their careful word choices, the strategic mention of Dad's health. I wonder briefly if his chest pains are real or simply another tactic. That evening, I sit at my desk overlooking Boston Harbor, the lights of the financial district reflecting on the dark water. My calculator and legal pad lay before me, figures carefully arranged. $48,000 for Caleb's 90-day rehabilitation program at Lakeside Recovery, the most respected gambling addiction center in New England. $4,500 for 3 intensive financial counseling sessions for Mom and Dad with Martin Weber, the retirement specialist who helped Grandpa Wallace structure his original estate. My own money, not the trust's, a clean separation between consequence and compassion. I draft the letter myself, though Gloria will review it tomorrow before it's sent certified mail. This offer represents the extent of my personal financial support. The trust assets remain protected and unavailable. Full participation in these programs is required. Zero compliance equals zero support. This offer expires in 7 days. I sign my name, the pen pressing firmly against the paper. Not an olive branch exactly, more like a life preserver thrown with clear instructions. Grab it properly or drown. 3 days later, Gloria calls. They held a family meeting last night, she says. Without you, obviously. How do you know? Prescott called me this morning. Professional courtesy. There's a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. He advised them to accept your terms. And? They've agreed. Her voice softens. He also advised them to drop any thought of challenging the trust. Explain the potential exposure they face if they pursue litigation. I close my eyes, picturing them around the dining room table. Dad's frustrated pacing. Mom's calculated tears. Caleb's desperate pleading. The gradual realization that their options have vanished. Is it over? I ask. The battle for the assets? Yes. Gloria hesitates. The family fallout? That's just the beginning. I hang up and walk to the window of my apartment, watching an elderly couple stroll along the harbor walkway, their hands clasped together. The woman leans slightly against the man's shoulder, their pace unhurried, synchronized after decades of walking side by side. Something tightens in my chest, not regret, exactly, but acknowledgement of the cost. Protection requires distance. Justice demands boundaries. I touch the pocket watch in my cardigan pocket, feeling its steady rhythm against my fingertips. Some legacies are worth preserving, even when the price is family peace. The Boston skyline glitters beyond my office window as I slide the last quarterly report into its folder. 1 year since that confrontation in my parents' living room, and the weight has finally lifted from my shoulders. The trust is secure, Grandpa's legacy protected, and my career has taken an unexpected turn toward prominence in the industry. Miss Whitaker? My assistant appears in the doorway. The Wallace Greystone Legacy Grant Committee is online too. I smile, thanking her as I reach for the phone. The grant program funding young watchmakers and restoration specialists has become my favorite professional achievement. Not the cover of Investment Quarterly last month featuring my ethical portfolio strategies, but this small effort to honor what truly mattered to Grandpa. The committee call is brief but satisfying. 6 new apprentices will receive funding this year, including a promising young woman from Vermont who reminds me of myself at 20. My phone buzzes with a text from Gloria as I pack my briefcase. Caleb completed his final counseling session today. Counselor reports genuine progress, still sober. I pause, allowing a small swell of cautious hope. The rehabilitation program wasn't easy for him, months of confronting demons he'd spent years feeding. The night manager position at the hotel isn't glamorous, but it's honest work with structure and accountability. More than I expected, if I'm being truthful. The train ride from Boston to Vermont passes in contemplative silence. Spring has arrived early this year, painting the countryside in tender greens and yellows. I press my forehead against the cool window glass, watching familiar landmarks slide past. Mom and Dad have settled into their condo near Hartford, downsized from the sprawling house where pretense mattered more than truth. The financial counseling sessions were humbling for them, particularly for Dad, whose pride took the hardest hit. We speak monthly now, brief conversations, carefully navigating the broken trust between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps something like understanding. Next week, Saturday, the caretaker's truck isn't in the drive when I arrive at the farmhouse. Just as well I need this first visit alone. The freshly painted white clapboards gleam in the afternoon sun, the porch swing restored to its proper place. I run my fingers along the wooden railing Grandpa built when I was 10, remembering how he taught me to sand with the grain. Inside, everything feels both familiar and renewed. The mechanical collection shines behind museum-quality glass, each piece meticulously labeled with its history and significance. No more hidden in storage or secretly sold off. The estate manager has arranged weekend tours for local schoolchildren and collectors, just as Grandpa would have wanted. I make my way to his study, now a small reading room with his books lining the walls. From my pocket, I withdraw the 1908 pocket watch, its gold case catching the sunlight streaming through the windows. The mechanism ticks steadily, perfect time, just as he insisted. I remember finding it in that pawn shop, the sick feeling when I realized Caleb had stolen it before Grandpa was even buried. Settling into the porch swing as evening approaches, I hold the watch in my palm. Beyond the rolling fields, the sun sinks toward the mountains, painting the sky in amber and rose. A family of deer emerges from the tree line, moving unhurriedly across the meadow where Grandpa and I once planted heirloom tomatoes. The value was never in the things, I whisper, remembering his words. It was in the knowing what matters. What matters is integrity, standing firm when it would be easier to bend, the courage to protect what's right, even when you stand alone. The legacy wasn't the properties or the investments or even this beautiful timepiece. It was the moral compass he calibrated in me, steady as the watch's mechanism. On Monday, I'll interview another potential advisor for the mentorship program I'm building. Young professionals who understand that ethics and finance aren't separate realms but a single ecosystem of trust. As darkness settles over the valley, I close the watch with a soft click. My new family isn't bound by blood but by shared values, Gloria. My colleagues at Meridian who've become friends, the craftspeople maintaining these properties, the students receiving scholarships in his name. Thank you, Grandpa, I murmur, smiling as the first stars appear above the Vermont hills. The pocket watch rests against my heart, keeping perfect time.